Please welcome to the stage CEO of Millennial Ventures, Dr. Brandi Baldwin, and Corporate Purpose, CSR and ESG Advisor, Bea Boccalandro, in conversation with Skift Meetings Executive Editor, Andrea Doyle.
Hello, is everyone having a good time? All right. Just a quick reminder, if you have any questions, please be sure to drop them in the app, as we will have time afterwards to answer them. So we are going to talk about the very important topic of diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI. It certainly is a hot button issue. It's taken center stage at the presidential election, and there's so many companies that are actually slashing their DEI departments. I wanted a quick show of hands as to how many people here have DEI representatives or DEI departments. Okay, less than half. We will touch upon this during our session, but I did want to get started with Dr. Brandi Baldwin. We met earlier this year while I was writing a story for Skift Meetings about Tourism Diversity Matters, a nonprofit DEI organization in the industry, and the fact that there was a shakeup, and Dr. Brandi had written an open letter, and that's where we met. So I was hoping you could touch upon that. And my question is, if an organization like Tourism Diversity Matters can't get it right, who can?
Okay, wow, let's just start there then.
We're gonna jump right in.
Now, no, you know what, one of the things I think that happened with Tourism Diversity Matters was stellar leaders on the board. I was there, you know, during its inception and became the board chair my 4th year in. And one of the things that I think all of our organizations need to be mindful of is, you know, focusing so much on our service delivery, our product, our offerings. We treat our clients and our customers like they are the best. We move quickly to make those organizational changes, but do we move as quickly when it's time to take care of our house inside of the organization? And so, although in this, instance, it seemed like it was all about, a specific individual or maybe a group of leaders, I think it really was representative of something that all of our organizations can just be more cautious and aware of, that your brand on the outside, all the value that you bring, all the work that we do to do great work, we have to do that same work and put that same effort towards making sure the culture inside of the organization is in alignment with those values, particularly of honoring diversity, treating everyone equitably, and supporting inclusive practices.
Do you feel that was a turning point for the industry as far as DEI is concerned?
I do, and here's the thing, TDM was maybe a little bit of a public example, but we all have those experiences in our organizations over time where there's maybe someone that says they weren't maybe treated well. There's maybe a policy or procedure that wasn't followed exactly how it was supposed to. And so I think our goal moving forward with DEI needs to be being consistent. And unfortunately, what I didn't know at the time when I did that open letter was that this was a situation where when there's smoke, there's fire. And so I thought maybe I was the only one experiencing this, and 10 other women actually came out and said they experienced the same thing. And so I think my message to everyone and what I took away from that experience wasn't really something negative towards TDM, but I think it's a great example. And just with us moving forward, thinking about equity and diversity and inclusion, how are we making sure that we are keeping our employees, team members, contractors, everyone in mind in terms of treating them at the same level of excellence that we would with our clients and customers.
And we've covered this story and we'll continue to cover it, so please be sure to check out Skift Meetings. So the Society for Human Resource Management, Microsoft, Ford Motor Company, these are a few of the companies scaling back DEI. Do companies still need actual DEI departments? I'll start with you, Bea.
Yes, thank you. I'm thrilled to be here. What a great meeting. I'm going to answer that a little experientially instead of me just talking to you. So there's probably something that you could really use advice on right now, and that is where to take the perfect selfie, okay? Right? Right? Look at this environment. So it would make sense to ask someone around you, what is the number one place you suggest taking a selfie in this amazing space? So go ahead and pair up, and the person whose first name comes first, alphabetically, is going to ask the question. And the other person is going to answer the question, what is your number one suggestion for where to take a selfie in this beautiful space? Okay, so just take 30 seconds to do that. Good luck.
Okay, let's see. Let's go. We'll go.
Okay, go ahead and wrap it up. It's just your number one suggestion. Great. I know you guys like networking, so a little mini networking there. So now, if you ask that question, now you're going to turn to that same person, ask that same question 9 more times. Okay? No, of course you're not going to do that. That would be inane, right? That would be getting the same answer 10 times. That is the cost of foregoing diversity, is that we get the same answers over and over again. So your question as to whether organizations need DEI departments, I'm not sure, frankly, because we are in the adolescence of this discipline of DEI, and we know that a lot of efforts have not gone well. That's very typical of an adolescent discipline, but we absolutely do need DEI efforts, whether there's a department or not. I have clients that have very, very strong DEI practices without a department, and that is actually the strength. To Brandi's comment, they focus on the culture. They focus on making it really positive. So I think that we absolutely need DEI efforts. I don't know whether we need a department or not, because if we are not putting diversity on our teams, if we're not putting diversity on the stage at your events, if we're not putting diversity in the planning committees that plan events, then what we're doing is we're getting the same answer over and over again. And I'm not just talking about, ethnic diversity, race diversity, gender diversity, really diversity of all the forms. Neurodiverse thinking is a form of diversity. Just having a different background, speaking with an accent, and coming from somewhere else is a form of diversity. So we cannot be running our organizations getting the same answer over and over again. That would be ridiculous. So we do need DEI efforts. I would love to hear what Dr. Brandi says about the department.
So what you're saying is we don't need a department, but we need a culture.
Yeah.
What do you feel about that, Dr. Brandi?
What I would say is, for larger organizations, multinational organizations, the larger your organization is, I would say you need a department, so that's how you scale your programming, your initiatives throughout. I think for potentially smaller organizations, you have to do a pulse check on your culture. You have to look at the data for the exit interviews. What's the attrition like, right? What is the employee experience? So HR has that data and information. If you feel that the work environment maybe lacks some trust there may be some culture issues, or even recent transitions that have happened, maybe some layoffs or just some reorganization, then I would say having a point person to support company culture is important. I'm not beholden to these terms DE&I, because DE&I, quite frankly, has turned into kind of like a dirty word, depending on who hears it, and it triggers some people. But I think that the values behind DEI are important, and it all goes back to building a positive company culture, as Bea said.
So that makes me think of your LinkedIn post. Dr. Brandi created an awesome LinkedIn post about this amazing event, and she got lots of comments, one of which was he felt DEI in many instances is more performative than it is genuine. Can you touch upon that?
Yes. So here's the thing. I'm going to give a slight pass to some organizations who launched into DEI after sort of George Floyd, after in that 2020 phase, right? Because I think the public was kind of saying, do something, do anything. At that time, I got a lot of backlash because I said, don't do it, don't do something, don't do anything. I'd rather have you not do anything than move fast in the wrong direction. But people were so pressured to do something to look like they were being in alignment with DE&I that they made a lot of mistakes. And so what I would say is performative behavior, again, comes back to really being in alignment. We want to be able to walk our talk. If your organization tries its best, no organization is going to be perfect, but if your organization is really trying its best, when issues happen, it's not about being perfect, but when the issue happens, how do we deal with it? Do we sweep it under the rug? Do we just suddenly not need that person's role anymore and they're just, all of a sudden they disappear? Or do we really try our best to make things right? And in that case, I think that it's not performative, it's a process. It's not about being perfect. But I think a lot of organizations maybe fell into a trap of optics. We just want to look like everything is great on the outside. And so for any industry, we want to make sure that we're doing it the right way. Now, let me just say this. In order to be able to do what I'm saying, because I see some head nods, but are we creating a culture where it's okay for someone to say, I really don't understand this DEI thing. I'm really tired of hearing about it. Please help me why it's going to help our organization. Please help me understand why it's going to help our bottom line. Do we have a culture where people are allowed to honestly say that and where you can feel comfortable to step up and answer that and say, you know what, so glad that I know that you're not 100% in with this. This is why, and give those answers to reach that common ground rather than, oh, there goes another one that doesn't believe in DEI. Oh my gosh, that's the kind of response that we've had, but we cannot be offended by a value that we hold true and dear to ourselves. So if you believe that honoring diversity, even diversity of thought, is important, if you believe that being as inclusive as possible, if you believe that treating people as equitably as possible is a real value, then we should be able to have conversations with those who think differently than us. The irony, and so if we can create those spaces so that we can bring people on board, organizations will not fall into perform, because what performative means is we're just going to pretend. There's someone here that we know that 50% of our organization doesn't really understand DEI, but we're not going to acknowledge it. We're just going to keep going, and that's not where organizations are going to be able to thrive from here on out.
So then you mentioned the George Floyd killing. After that, many corporations started employee resource groups. But Bea, you have said you feel in many instances employee resource groups actually do more harm than good. Mm-hmm. Can you explain?
Yes. So when I was younger and had even worse judgment than I have now, I decided to bike from San Francisco to LA to raise funds for AIDS. And it was a week-long event, and the vast majority of riders, there's like 2,000 riders, huge amount of riders, were gay men. And nowhere in the written material did it discourage me as a heterosexual woman to participate. And yet, that experience was interesting for me because I felt microaggressions. I felt I wasn't heard. I felt I was judged for my sexual orientation. I didn't feel like I belonged. Now, I'm very happy I had this experience because it gave me a better understanding of what it might be like to be systematically discriminated against. So I'm very happy I did it, and we raised a lot of funds and all of that. But my point is, it was hard to take seriously the call from this gay male population that we need to stop microaggressions, and we need to stop judging people by their sexual orientation when they were exhibiting that behavior towards me. And so I think that I have noticed with some of my clients that employee resource groups basically inadvertently but create like a petri dish for this reverse discrimination. Now, whether it really is reverse discrimination by the definition of the term, who knows, but I have heard from the individuals who are not part of the group that the employee resource group focuses on, that they feel discriminated against and they feel the microaggressions. So there are very valid critiques to the DEI that we're doing, and I think one of them is that reverse discrimination does not reverse discrimination. It actually feeds it. So I'm going to go back to what Dr. Brandi said. If you have a really positive culture where people are allowed to make mistakes, where people are always open-hearted and open-minded about what other people bring to the table, where people take effort to have other people feel a sense of belonging, you probably don't need the employee resource groups. And if you're going to have employee resource groups, then be very, very careful that they don't inadvertently create what some people might feel like is reverse discrimination.
So they don't unify. They create more separation?
They can. Not always. I mean, not always. Okay. So I do have some clients where they function very well. But I should say that they take a lot of, they spend a lot of effort making sure that that environment is one that everybody belongs. So most employee resource groups don't, in writing, exclude the individuals who are not part of the population that it focuses on, but nevertheless, and don't do that. That's a terrible idea. I think it's a terrible idea. I've never seen this work well, where it's like an employee resource group that focuses on Hispanics and doesn't allow anybody else in. I don't recommend that at all. But even if on paper anybody can come and be an ally, you also have to make a lot of effort to make sure that they feel welcome there. And so it can be done well, but it takes effort.
So you're both saying many are recalculating their DEI efforts. What does that look like in a practical matter, especially when it comes to events?
Yeah, so what I would say is we have to understand a couple of things. I've been saying it for 5 years, but I think people are ready to listen now. DEI is such a broad term, okay? And so there are sort of different brands of DEI, I think, that have come about. We have to understand first and foremost the political sphere and how they have hijacked terminology on all sides and kind of have a DEI-esque twist to it. With our organizations, with our meetings, with our events, with our destinations, I think we have to think about diversity, equity, inclusion as an extension of an employee experience or a customer or client experience. That's how we can start to wrap our brains around the value, because I think DEI, the way I've seen it, and I'm not a DEIer, I'm an organizational development consultant, right? And so for that being a part of what I do, I think that what I have seen is a lot of organizations taking maybe community organizing type of DEI into their organizations and wondering why it's not working. Instead of taking maybe an organizational development approach. So that would be the first thing. Let's kind of reframe what DEI is. It's an extension of an experience that we're trying to have. Community is important. That's why organizations do ERG. So when you're building the community, when you're building these raving fans, when you're building these raving employees that really love this, what can you do in order to make them feel like they belong, in order to honor the diversity that's in the room? You know, this is like an extension of what we already do. We know about experiences. We know about a feeling that we have when we leave a space. I think that it's going to be more relevant to keep that type of angle when we're talking about DEI of the future and how it's really going to help us. This last thing I'll kind of add to that is just us as individuals. You know, these are values. So many people are tied on these terminologies, diversity, equity, inclusion, and microaggressions, and all these things. They make it so complex. But what about the platinum rule? Treat others how they would like to be treated. Let's just start there. You know, those are the things that I think are going to help people move past the framework of are we doing DEI or not, and just are we connecting one-on-one and creating micro experiences that if we all do that, it's creating a larger experience that people want to be a part of.
So Autodesk, Destinations International, these are all organizations that have changed the terms they use when it comes to DEI. Do the terms matter?
Let it go. Just stop. Just stop with the terms. Just stop. Because terms are great for talkers. It helps us continue to explain what we are doing and what we're not doing and this and that. But we have to do less talking, more doing. Less doing, more being. Just be a place, just be a person, be an institution, an organization that says, hey, I appreciate that you're here. Hey, I'm Jamaican, you're a Latina woman. Let's just talk, let's just get together rather than continuing to try to define. And what it does sometimes, not all the times, because I think sometimes terminology helps guide us on where we need to go. It's a structure, right? But sometimes it's more confusion and it gives us an excuse to maybe not do certain things. So when Sherm says, oh, we're taking out equity, it's like, okay, now what? Now we're just having more discussion about what that means and what we should do, when it adds more confusion instead of saying, let's just connect on a human level. You know, we have people that we don't like that we work with. How about let's have a conversation with them and try to get some common ground instead of not being able to do the best of our ability at our job because I just don't like you. You know, like let's keep it on that relational level. I think organizations will get a lot further faster.
Earlier we had the honor of hearing from Seth Godin. And Bea, you talked about the fact that a lot of what he said applies to DEI. Can you explain?
Yeah, I love his current analogy. So diversity leads to amazing results. So there's hard data on juries, on academic teams, on boards, corporate boards, that the more diversity you have there, the better they perform. And there was just a study last week on advertising. So diverse advertising generates about 3.5% more sales. It's all fairly new research, maybe the last 15 years, most of it. Actually, interestingly enough, the US military has been on top of this for about 50 years. But the rest of the world has really caught on recently that diversity really drives results. It's very, very, I mean, you know, the exercise I did kind of shows why that would be, right? You get all sorts of different perspectives. You have a much broader range of ideas to draw from. And so it's the movement towards more diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging, if you want. It's a current. It is now a huge current. It's like this warm Gulf Stream moving forward, to use Seth's analogy of a current, only air instead of water. But there is, and he talked about tension. So where's the tension? The tension comes from some conservative areas that are attacking companies. One of my companies was just targeted last week by Starbucks, by Robbie Starbucks. So yes, I have an emergency call this afternoon to deal with that. So there is tension. It's coming the other way. It's a cold front. There are these miniature cold fronts. But if you're the company that's targeted, it's a big deal. And it can really set you back. And it can create a lot of havoc. But make no mistake, there's no turning back this current. It's, you know, when I talk to executives and even middle managers at this point, they're like, it makes complete business sense to continue moving forward with DEI. And I even have a couple of clients that have, you know, said that they're scaling back their efforts because the term DEI triggered some, you know, response, or it triggered a lawsuit, and they're still quietly moving forward, you know, changing terms and doing, you know, moving forward in a slightly different way. So I think that Seth's analogy of a current is a really helpful one, but only 16% of Americans are against DEI efforts in companies, and only 21% of white Americans. So the current in favor of DEI is much stronger, and it will win out in the long term. But we do have to survive these thunderstorms when the cold current comes in the opposite direction.
So sadly, we're just about at time, but I was hoping you could offer some actionable next steps.
Yes. So the first thing I would say to everyone is block out all the noise. Get clear on what your personal values are of just treating people with kindness, operating at a level of excellence in your organization, whether you have the titles and the terminology or not. The second thing I would say is in organizations, meetings, events, who's not there that should be in the room? Who's not experiencing the experience that's not there, and maybe why? How can we tap into that market? How can we tap into those individuals? What blind spots maybe do you have that are creating maybe marketing, maybe things like that that are not attracting a certain group that would really benefit from what you're doing? Push yourselves individually to kind of just stretch in that way. Organizationally, what I would say is focus on the data. Let's get outside of kind of the trends that are online and copycat DEI or whatever you want to call it. Just do a pulse check. Give the people what they want. Give the employees what they want. And I think this is a great opportunity to maybe recalibrate for some organizations, which means we did some things. It was kind of like cringe. Let's maybe try to do something new. It's no big deal, right? Maybe some organizations, you always have been a little bit, passive when it comes to engaging in conversations around how can we expand our efforts and be more inclusive. So maybe run a little faster. And then for others, you may need to kind of sunset the DEI focus because you already have a great experience, great event, great organization. You don't have to name it to say that you're doing it. You just have to go out and do the work.
So sadly, that red light blinking is not passive, and that is all the time we have. I appreciate you for sending questions in. We'll be sure to continue the conversation in Skift meetings. Thank you both so much.
Thank you. Thank you.